Matt McGlone, you're very welcome back to the Celtic Soul Podcast on a morning where we thought we'd be only talking about how bad Celtic were in the second half on Sunday and looking towards two games this week, Falkirk tomorrow night first. But we woke up to the news, well I didn't because it was in bed at 10 o'clock, that Brendan has resigned officially and Dermot Desmond has gone off on one with a. We don't hear much from him, but he released a statement late into the evening. So, Matt, give us your take on the
Well,
last 48 hours.
I was just sitting winding down last night, and my phone started to go off like, what's going on here? and when the club statement came out, I thought, well, if we're looking at the football results and the performance of the team, then Brendan isn't winning big games anymore. We could arguably say that we go way back to last season and say the last big game that he might have won was against Leipzig. You could maybe say that. Losing the Scottish Cup final, losing to Cara Almaty. He neither beat Ferguson when he was manager at Rangers. I can't remember the last time he beat them. Things weren't going well for Brendan, and it looked like a downward spiral. And whatever was going on, change was required. I think, we're all sort of, I think most people were sort of thinking that up until last night's statement. Now, when this statement came out from the club, I'm thinking, okay, that's pretty normal. But astonishingly, Dermot Desmond comes out with an individual statement. Now, no matter the rights or wrongs here of this, there's a thing, statesman-like has to exist, as in like the club has a standard of how they speak about things. I think for one person, he's a shareholder. He's the single biggest shareholder, but he's not the majority shareholder because there isn't one. We have a single biggest shareholder and then other shareholders. I think for somebody just to come out like that, I'm a bit uncomfortable with it. Now, I'm not talking about the rights and wrongs of Brendan's situation. I'm talking about making a statement. I mean, that was a character assassination for somebody that works for you. And I find that a bit troubling. The club obviously never came out that, but an individual did.
Yeah, Matt, I was very surprised that it was like when the statement came out. I read the full statement and you go, that's typical. That's a typical statement from Celtic. That's saying thanks, best of luck. And we go a new chapter. But then
Yeah.
to read there, someone who doesn't normally comment on the club, so something's got us back up. I presume the writing was on the wall for Brendan as soon as he came out and says, "I haven't been backed. They're not my players. I'm not signing the players." And he did when the Celtic Fans Collective was set up and there was the silent protest, and he never came out and criticised the fans. He said he could understand the frustrations. So I think that was all adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah. I mean, being a veteran of one or two campaigns regarding fans, I think it's very foolish for anybody at the club to come out and criticise the support because we are the lifeblood of the club, and the way your club runs and has finance comes from us. I'm not saying that anybody is beyond criticism, but I don't think you shoot yourself in the foot and fire into your own fans. And nobody has really came out and done that at the club. My frustration here is, we're here to play football, to win football games. And that's what draws people like you and I and the thousands that will be listening to this and the tens of thousands of Celtic fans all over the world, whether you're a season ticket holder or not. We support Celtic to win football games, but now we have this gigantic argument, and whether Brendan comes back or not is still to be seen. But we're here actually to play football matches, and this is a bit of a personal attack, you have to say. And if you're Brendan, you must be thinking to yourself, I've got a career here to continue with. Do you come out and defend yourself? I would defend myself immediately, because somewhere in the middle is the real story. We have one snapshot version from Dermot Desmond. We haven't heard from Brendan Rodgers. Somewhere in the middle, exactly what went on. I mean, I read in part of the statement that no one is bigger than the club. Well, that's absolutely correct. And everybody has to remember that. Person making the statement, person managing the team, the person playing for Celtic, and the Celtic supporters. And that is the sort of standard that we live by, isn't it? It's so important, Celtic, that nobody is bigger than the club.
Yeah, well, man, we've always said that, a player leaves, great players like, Paul McStay retires, Henry Glasson leaves, players come and go, managers come and go, fans remain from a young age till they die. They're there, they're back in the club, or they're back in the team. But maybe Dermot should read the statement again, because he's one man that with that statement coming out, that thinks that he is more important than anyone at the club.
He is what? Sorry?
He thinks he's more important than anyone at the club, judging by that statement.
Well, what he thinks and what he says is up to him. You can never control how another person speaks. But what I would say is that statement, and anybody connected with the football club, always have to remember that no one is bigger than the club. The biggest thing about Celtic is our existence and who we are and why we are a football club. That's why nobody's bigger than the club, because it's massive. The reason we started, the reason we continue, the reason we're still alive and we're still playing and winning things up until the end of last season is because no one is bigger than the club.
Well, Matt, your book is, a book you wrote. It's a great book, Emotionally Celtic. Do you think Dermot's emotionally Celtic with coming out with a rant like that? Or it seems to me that everything that's in that statement smells of the leak to the press. When the Sun ran the story on Brendan engineering his own way out of the club.
Well, I mean, we don't know that. We don't know. Somebody obviously designed it that way. Whoever did it, we don't know. But we have to be very careful here that we don't fall into the trap that one man is bigger than the club, because that's the way it seems to be coming across. And that to me is a very dangerous situation, because does the person with the most money shout the loudest? Well, collective are Celtic. I say that before the Celtic Collective name was put together. But the collective of Celtic is the people that run the club, is the manager, and is the supporters. They're the three main elements. There's lots of wee elements in between, but they're the three main elements that make running a club possible. So out of that, we cannot have one individual who shouts the loudest. Now, there's so many things to unpack in that statement. And without commenting on every single thing in it, my worry and concern is that it was made by an individual. And I don't think any club would come out and attack another individual, in this case being the manager or the ex-manager, in that fashion. And if you and I were board members today, and we're sitting looking at that statement, you're saying, well, My name's not at the bottom of that. Your name's not at the bottom of it. None of the board's name's at the bottom of it. But the major shareholder's name is. The single biggest shareholder's name is. So who's running the show? Do we need a board if one person's just going to do this? That's my concern of where we're heading and the effect this has on the next 4 days. There's big games coming up.
Yeah, someone described it this morning in a message as mafia-like.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a load of names you can attach to this. I'm obviously still a bit trying to work all this out, because what an attack on an individual. Now, if we're talking about whether Brendan's time was up, that's a separate matter. And I think it was. I think Brendan's time was up. The team weren't being motivated. We weren't getting the results. And there's obviously an ego battle being fought out between, well, who's it been fought out between? Certainly between Brendan and Dermot, or Brendan and the board. But the board didn't put out that statement. But in these last couple of weeks, there's been months since the summer disastrous transfer window. Brendan has been leaking out things, about what's going on inside. And it was getting tacky. And the comment after the Dundee game, about expected to race against a Ferrari when you get the keys to a Honda Civic, that was crass. Absolutely crass. See, if I'm a player in that dressing room and he's telling me to get there and win games for Celtic and bust a gut and do your best, but this is what he thinks of you. It's not on. It's not on. Then when he was asked about it at the end of last week, he sort of tried to make it out as if it was about a single performance, and then commented on the Sturm Graz game about being a better performance, and he named some other car better than a Honda Civic. I mean, the whole thing's a nonsense. It's an absolute nonsense. So there was obviously discontent behind the scenes. We've heard one side of it. And I have to say, on this one side that we've heard, if all this toxicity was going on over these last few months, why was it allowed to continue? The PLC, the board, the single man Dermot Desmond calling the shots, why are they not stepping in and sorting it out and doing what's best for Celtic? Sorting it out before it gets to this stage. How can you say this has ran on for months? And you're in charge of stopping it or letting it run on. A lot of it doesn't add up.
And do you take Matt, as you say, the veteran of campaigns? Now, the supporters groups are very united at the moment. And I don't think that the campaign is going to stop. It's a different campaign, Matt, that you were involved in. The club is not going bust. It's not, it's not been run into the ground. There's plenty of money in the bank. It's a different campaign. But I think if Dermot thinks that by releasing this statement and getting rid of the manager and replacing him with his buddy Martin O'Neill, who was on TalkSport yesterday, saying he thought Hearts would win the league. So obviously he got the call late in the day. Now, I think the Sean Maloney thing was always on the cards. I've wrote about this a number of times, that we created a job, a pathway manager. I think Brendan was never staying after the 3 years. I think Sean was being groomed. John Kennedy's gone now as well. I think Sean was being groomed for the role. And Martin O'Neill is not a coach. He won't be on the training ground. He'll be in the dugout. We know he's a great motivator. He's probably past the sell-by day. So it's Sean Maloney's job. It's his to lose now, because if he comes in, steadies the ship, gets the best out of what he has, and doesn't rock the boat, doesn't look for too much from the board, I think Sean Maloney goes into that job next year permanently, as did when Dominic McKay came in and was heralded as this guy that he headhunted, he lasted 3 months. Michael Nicholson came in as interim CEO. If Michael had to come in straight away after the 10 in a row disaster season, there would have been uproar among the fans. But he came in, Ange had steadied the ship, results were good, and then he was made permanent. But he would never have been given that job straight away after Peter Lawwell stepped down. And then Peter comes back as chairman. So it's jobs to the boys in there.
Well, on your first point about Sean Maloney hasn't done enough in football to be Celtic manager. It's as simple as that. He hasn't done enough or been successful in football to take this job on. For me, this is a holding position. After last night, had there been nobody put into place, Martin O'Neill's a 73-year-old man. After last night, had nobody been around to be put in place, we would have been rudderless in the dressing room. Nobody to take the team. John Kennedy's away as well. So for me, this is a sticking plaster, and it must only be a sticking plaster for maximum 2 weeks, absolute maximum 2 weeks, till we find ourselves a proper manager. We're a big club. We have to act like a big club, and we have to get a big manager in. Don't get a guy in who's one of the boys, as you said. Martin O'Neill is 73, and he will be looking after himself mentally and physically as how he handles such a tough situation, and that's not a long-term job for him. That's for sure. So we have to be looking at a complete new manager coming in with a complete set of backroom staff. Because as far as I know, Brendan's head of fitness, Glenn Driscoll, and 2 other guys are away with him. Strange thing about the statement last night as well. I was at the very first press conference when Brendan came in, and he said that he would be here for 3 years unless he gets the Dan Mac. That was his phrase, the Dan Mac. And he said something like, that's a local phrase, Dan Mac being the sack. But the statement said last night that he resigned. Now, if he resigned, if you resigned and then the single major shareholder comes out and makes that statement, that doesn't marry up, does it?
No.
I mean, you would think if you make that statement, then you're the guy that sacked him. Is that not a bit closer to the truth?
Yeah, well, Matt, whatever way the wording is, when I read he had resigned, I went, right, well, he's done a deal. He's got paid up a couple of million for the rest of the season. He moves on. They released a statement, and then you see the Dermot Desmond'S statement, and then you go, well, this is, it adds. It doesn't add fuel to the fire. It's a pump for.
Well, you and I have been around this game for a long time, Andrew. Where have you ever read in world football any kind of statement like that?
Never.
Made by an individual after the club made their statement?
Yeah. And then it was put out on the official channels of the club. It wasn't as if he put it out himself. This was, I'm number one. This is what I'm saying. And, people will call it throwing Brendan under the bus. Others who are not in Brendan's camp will back the statement. Already, if messages this morning in the WhatsApp groups, Brendan did split the support. Dermot Desmond certainly splits the support. But I don't think it's going to, there still is answers needed. We need to know why we're not signing half-decent players, why we're not improving the squad. There's issues around the stadium, and there's huge issues with communication to the fans. So, we're not asking for the world, but it's just like the silence is always deafening. When Brendan went the first time, the club said nothing really until they waited for the fans' reaction. And when the fans' reaction was the majority of he's a rat, he's this, he's that, then it was. I remember going to Hibs. The next game, I'm almost sure the next game I went to anyway was Hibs away at Easter Road. And I remember people getting selfies with Peter Lawwell and the board members. But I don't think anyone's going to be queuing up for selfies the next time we go to Easter Road.
Yeah, well, you're talking there about, the lack of transfer action in the summer. The big statement last night saying that there was conversation getting back to last November, December, I think. And then again in the summer. And it didn't seem like he would be staying. Now, see if that's the case. You say to yourself, so it goes back to who's running the show here. You say to yourself, okay, he's not staying, so we're not going to give him any money. So if we're not going to give him any money, the squad are going to suffer, and this is going to drag out and get toxic, which it did and is, and now we're dealing with it in the last days of October. The PLC's job is to run that club properly, to make the decisions properly, that he's staying or he's not staying, you're backing him or you're not backing him. You don't have an in-between in that situation. So it's just like there's nobody driving the bus here. The phrase asleep at the wheel. Celtic are just careering all over the place with a manager that the board are sort of thinking he's either going to get sickened and leave or we'll sicken him. But in between, we're not running the club properly. And that's your job, mate. Mate, that's your job to run that club. PLC, board, whatever you are as a collective, whoever's running this year weren't running it and haven't been running it properly, and we're left with this absolute mess. So this is all not down to one person.
You mentioned October. Do you think that the board have learned, or Dermot Desmond has learned from the Neil Lennon sacking, which went on? Neil was down maybe way too long, and now they've said, right, well, we need to get Brendan out early, get someone in to steady the ship. But I'm just finding the whole thing bizarre. Everything, and then on the pitch, Sunday, which I'd invite John to speak about, because we had this scheduled in. Sunday, we go a goal behind, and then Callum McGregor, in the first half, he shows his leadership skills. He grabs the game by the balls, and we get back into the game. And then we have a second half where you're just scratching your head,
Yeah. So at half time, the manager or whoever is not got through to the players. The Hearts manager obviously has. They've come out spirited, fighting, want to win the game. We came back and I thought we looked reasonably good up to half time. Second half was a joke. We cataclysmic mistakes. Engels turned his back for the second goal when the shot went in. Murray kind of pulled his leg back as if he was going to try and block it. Murray gave away the first goal. These things, when he gave away the first goal, Murray, I felt sorry for him because that can happen to any player. When it happens to a younger player, it's bad. But complete naivety later on when he tackled the boy in the box who was going nowhere. So we've individual mistakes. But overall, the fight in the second half wasn't there. The motivation wasn't there. The encouragement in amongst all the players wasn't a collective. It was an individual thing. People were doing individual things all over the park. So we got the result that we deserved. I don't think this is over by any stretch of the imagination. But I think we have to get sorted out, and the people that are there paid to run the club should start doing their job.
Yeah, Matt. Looking at the team now, Matt, from my personal opinion, like I look at the team and I go, there's lots of options on the left. There's lots of options in the middle of the park. We've nothing up front, which is the most important part of any team. And on the right side, when you're still relying on James Forrest, like with injuries now as well, the right side is just like it's there to be exploited. And I'm scratching my head to understand why they sold Adam Meada. They cashed in on him when we didn't get into the Champions League. They normally cash in on somebody when we don't qualify. But when Meada came in on loan, he made a big difference. His goals against Hibs and Motherwell, his cup final goal. Not the best striker ever to pull a jersey on for Celtic, but he certainly is better than what we have there at the moment, fit.
Yeah, well, apparently the manager thought Dolberg was coming in, and then he wasn't coming in. Then Adam Meada get brought back the Saturday night before the Rangers game. And you're saying to yourself, what's the point of that? He's in no state of mind
State, yeah.
He's mentally not prepared for the game, such an important game. So that was another shambles again. But all this goes back to the very fact that the people that are meant to be running the club, whether keeping Rodgers or not keeping him, or backing him or not backing him, weren't doing their job properly. And now we're almost into November, 8 points behind, and we have this nuclear explosion at Celtic. So it all goes back to our frustration is coming over here. It all goes back to the very fact that no decisive decisions were made in the summer to run the club properly, as whether to fund the manager or keep the manager. It seemed to be just let it run, let it drift. Now, if you and I live our lives like letting situations drift, then we know there's a problem at the end of that road. You either address a problem and deal with it, or you wait for something to hit you further down the road. And that's what the Celtic board did. They let this whole mess drift, not doing their jobs properly. They are accountable. They are accountable to the supporters.
Yeah, man, and that seems to be the big problem. They don't seem to be. It's like we had one meeting. I don't think there's another one planned. But straight away, after the first meeting, they should have been said, right, well, let's get another date in. We haven't addressed everything. We haven't agreed on everything. Let's get another meeting because, dialogue is where it's at. No conflict was ever resolved without dialogue, and we need to see there has to be some kind of to and fro, between the fans and the board. There has to be, because we can't go on, because as someone said to me, an ex-player said to me the weekend, he says, what's the end game for everybody? When does it end? And no one has the answer, because nobody knows. Nobody's going to back down on this unless the club get their act together. And that doesn't look like happening anytime soon, especially with that statement last night.
Yeah, last night's statement wasn't helpful at all to any end game. You're right, there is an end game required here. And even the sort of keenest sort of supporter reading a situation at Celtic is finding it hard to find an answer here. I think part of this drift between the club and the support has been that we'll always be there, we're a cash cow, just give us the money. Give us the money. That always seems to be the way. So therefore, you have that mindset against our mindset, which is, we're giving you the money, but we want you to run the club properly. And we're here backing it. What other business do you get money automatically from people like us, the supporters? There's no other business. But we don't have anywhere else to go, because we support one team. If we're not going to take our business somewhere else. In other walks of life and shops and businesses, you can't take your business elsewhere. So you have this mindset that they'll always be here, as in they, as in us. And that, I think, is a problem when you're dealing with people that think of you and I and others that support this club, that they think of us like that. I think you have a problem there right away. So when the support, get organised and say, this is not good enough, you're taking the mickey here. We're putting in, buying this, buying that, buying this. But you're not giving back. So now you have this current situation because of that, because they never dealt with the situation and they looked upon us just as a cash cow. And that's why you have two different mentalities here. They were stuck with that's what they think of us. And we're here just pouring money in all the time.
I'm basically saying, enough is enough. Like, run the club properly or get someone in that can run it properly.
Yeah. The situation now, which is different from 1994, is they were forward-thinking people, Celtic minds at heart, guys like John Keane, Fergus McCann, Brian Dempsey, and people that invested in the club. They were ready to move in. But when the sack the board gets chanted now, we don't have somebody to bring in. So there's two elements here for me. One is when you shan't sack the board, I get it, you're unhappy, and that's why you're saying that. But you have to know what's coming in after you shan't sack the board. And that's the problem at the minute. We don't have a Dempsey, John Keane, Fergus McCann option. And that was the difference back then. Although the whole situation is different because the club is dying. It's not dying now. It just hasn't been run properly. That's the difference. But the sack the board statement is twofold. Okay, you want to sack certain individuals on it, but you don't have people ready to move in. Nobody has stood up yet and said, I will go into Celtic and I will run this different, better. John Keane, Brian Dempsey, Fergus McCann, Willie Hawkey, Michael McDonald, Gerard Wisefield, they were all options at the time. That's what, half a dozen men who were all options. Today, there's not a single one as an option.
Great point, man.
And so, with anything, we have to be realistic of the situation. Shouting and chanting, it's fine, but you have to be realistic of, well, what is the option to what you want out? What do you want in? Who is standing up today and saying, I'm going to come in and I'm going to give you fans who deserve better, but I'm going to give you better. There's nobody there doing that today. That is another part of this whole thing.
Now, looking forward, Matt, we're back in Glasgow. Well, I'm back in Glasgow tomorrow night. We play Falkirk, who have had a mixed bag of results this season. I think after the weekend they're sixth. I wrote yesterday before I knew Brendan was going that a win against Falkirk only papers over the cracks. Ahead of a big semi-final against the Rangers, but Martin O'Neill's back in Glasgow today. I see he was booked to do a gig in Murphy's. I reckon that's getting shelved now.
Well, we started this recording at 10 o'clock today, and it was put out all over TalkSport that Martin O'Neill's doing an interview with Jim White at 10 o'clock today. And I'm thinking, why are you not on the training ground at Leicester? We've got a game tomorrow night. Why are you giving an interview? I'm not being critical here, but I find it astonishing you're giving an interview to Jim White. I'm hoping he's doing it from Glasgow, and it will take half an hour because he's got a job to do at Celtic. My only concern now is where we go as a football team.
Yeah, he's a motivational speech to get ready anyway, that's for sure. But then, what does Maloney do on the training ground today? He hasn't got much time.
I would assume that he has been watching. I can't even remember what his job is at Celtic.
He is the pathway manager, which I don't think he'll be replaced if he does get the job.
The pathway manager,
something like that, yeah. And
I think you and I could do that job.
But Matt, just talking about the pathway, right? it's incredible that there's an academy section on the website, Celtic's official website. There's an academy section. It's never updated since the summer. We haven't had one result about the academy or write up about the academy, only when a player comes in and signs a contract. And that's the same with the B team now. Last year, you could go on, you could read the match report, you knew who was in the team. I would especially be looking at it because Rocco's in the Irish setup. Rocco Vata, who, if he hadn't went, would have been a better option than what we have now up front. But this season, the B team are doing poorly. They were beaten again last week. We haven't had one match report on the website. No, again, communication, and not even a result. So I'm relying on the likes of Tommy Stevenson on Facebook to post up, I'm at the game, or to text them, how did we do? We now have a pathway manager, but yet the underage teams and the reserves are no longer reported on.
Yeah, well, that's an issue further down the line, I suppose. But it's another symptom, isn't it?
Yes.
It's another symptom that things are further down the line, they're not being done properly. To answer your original point, Maloney, he must know the training regime. The players must be as bewildered as the supporters. Things were very hastily done yesterday at 10:15 last night. So the players must be bewildered. From our point here, we have to be thinking, all we're thinking is 3 points tomorrow night, and then we've got another 3 or 4 days to sort out the game at the weekend. But if it's possible for the players we can't really, but if for the players to put this out their mind and focus on getting 3 points, it keeps us in the race. And without having another complication about being more points behind, let's focus to get these 3 points tomorrow. Gives us a bit of breathing space. A lot's going to happen between now and the weekend. You can be pretty sure of that.
100%, Matt. I presume Martin O'Neill is going to take the press conference today. I can't imagine Sean Maloney's going to take it. He'll be on and I presume a senior player will take it. If it's not Conor McGregor, it'll be definitely a senior player because there's enough people be thrown under the bus this week.
Yeah, well, it's a case of being reorganised literally within 24 hours, isn't it? That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to reorganise within 24 hours. And I feel that with all the stuff that's going on, we have to focus very narrowly on the next 24 hours and then take each day as it comes till we get a new manager. And the Maloney-Martin O'Neill thing is a temporary holding position as far as I'm concerned. If it becomes anything else, I'll be absolutely astonished.
Yeah, Matt, I think you could be astonished because why did John Kennedy go then? So surely him and Martin O'Neill could have steadied the ship. He knows the players. He's there longer than Sean. That's just my take. That's just my take on it, Matt. We've been wrong before. I was wrong when I thought when we bought Engels and Adamida that we were going to start shopping and we were going to start paying the money for the player rather than waiting. We were going to get players in early. I was wrong there. Very wrong.
Yeah. The John Kennedy one is a strange one because the suddenness of all this has literally happened yesterday. And John Kennedy has decided his future in between. If we're to believe it's been said that Brendan resigned, then why did John Kennedy leave? Did John Kennedy resign? Or was John Kennedy sacked? Or was the situation that John Kennedy is actually looking after himself? Because if we go by everything, John Kennedy was offered a gig at Tottenham when Ange went. Ange wanted to take him and John stayed faithful to Celtic. Is it a case now that he's got a relationship, a football relationship with Rodgers, and that Brendan getting out the door, he will get a job somewhere else, and he said to John, "You will be my number 2 wherever I end up." And John has decided, I've been 27 odd years or whatever it is at Celtic. There's so much going on. I've seen so many change. I've been here under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 managers, maybe John has been. counting Brendan twice. As John just decided that, Rodgers has said to him, I'll be back in football at some point somewhere, and you will be my number two. And he's sort of thought, yeah, that'll do for me. I need a change out of here.
Time will tell, Ma. Final. I'm just going to throw a name out there. Ange Postecoglou. He's lost 2 jobs this year. Dermot Desmond doesn't have a big black book of football contacts. I'd say he's more golf coaches in his black book than he has football coaches. But I don't see him coming back because I think when he left, I think he upset Dermot as well.
Yeah, and it would seem like I've never met the guy, but I only know what I see of him in the media, as in never met either of them actually, Postecoglou or Dermot Desmond. But from what I see of him in the media, he doesn't seem to be the kind of guy that forgets easy, and you upset him, then he's not going to forget either.
He's certainly not going to be bringing Brendan out for Christmas lunch.
No, so Ange, I don't know the current relationship between Ange and Dermot Desmond. Celtic should really have a football consultancy, an outside football consultancy, giving them advice on managers, because you would think that people in the building don't really know all the good managers that are out and about there. A football consultancy who make it their business to see like analytics of who good managers are, would have a long list of managers, which would open up the options for Celtic to have one of those managers. Ange, a big part of me thinks it's not great bringing somebody back because you're having to recreate what was great in the first place. And sometimes you can't recreate what's great in the first place. How many people go back to ex-partners and try and recreate that situation in life? But another part of me thinks that there's a really good fit at Celtic for Ange. When he went to Tottenham, it was obviously for massive bucks, and I didn't like the way he left. Remember that walk-on that was at Hampden at the end of the cup final? Fantastic walk-ons are always great, but there's some that are better than others. There was a fantastic walk-on after the Inverness Cup final when Ange left, and he stood there, and the whole team stood there. There's a great picture of them in the line, standing as a Celtic end. And I thought to myself, how can you ever leave that? How can you walk away from that love and devotion that these people are showing you? How can you do that? Walked out of that stadium overwhelmed by that and thinking, nobody can ever walk away from that. But he did. So it sort of taught me a bit of a lesson that, although we're very emotive, we're thinking we're backing of Celtic, other people see it as a vehicle and it's just a job. But I didn't think he was a good fit at Tottenham. He certainly wasn't a good fit at Nottingham Forest. And all being said and done, I'll try to remove the sentimentality out of this. I think he's a good fit at Celtic. But I'm not advocating he comes back as a manager, but just my thoughts that he's a good fit at Celtic. Celtic could be thinking outside the box. The boy that came in at Crystal Palace, I don't think Andy had ever heard of him, and he's done fantastically well at Crystal Palace, won the FA Cup there, and he's doing well with them. So there are people out there that you and I maybe haven't heard of, and I think that's why perhaps you need a football consultancy group to say, this is what we do every day of the week. We have studied managers all over the world, all over Europe. What about this guy? But in saying that, I don't think Celtic are totally naive there, because they did pull Ange Postecoglou out of, was it Japan he was in?
After Eddie Howe had decided he wasn't coming up.
So who told Celtic about Ange Postecoglou? Because you and I'd never heard of him. I don't think I hadn't. Did you?
No.
So
somebody did. Matt, I'm just coming to the end of the podcast, and I think we've just lost the connection. So I will say thank you very much to Matt McGlone. Matt, I'll talk to you soon.